All right, today we're doing The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And who didn't have this as required reading in high school? I don't know. Almost everybody does. Not exactly sure why. It's actually not the best writing that ever happened. He does a couple innovative things, I guess. One of the things mentioned is talks about time a lot, mentions time over and, different ways of talking about time. The story vacillates a little bit between current times in the story and the history of the characters, which kind of adds for some suspense and interest. F. Scott Fitzgerald was kind of one of those Ernest Hemingway, wander the earth, kind of have not a really strong moral code in place. I think he had affairs, his wife had affairs, she went insane and ended up in an asylum, he was a drunk, but everybody's really vigilant about emphasizing that he did not write when he was drunk, which I'm not sure why that matters, but anyway, I just, it's kind of in that 20th century class of not a lot of morality going on. But I do have to say that compared to other, especially Hemingway stuff, the moral code is clearer. Like, Fitzgerald is obviously, through the main, the narrator that tells the story, Fitzgerald kind of makes him aloof, he doesn't make judgment calls and he doesn't have a moral stance on what's happening, but there are things that are distasteful to him, and so he does kind of help there be a little bit more of a moral framework than there is in other really famous 20th century novels. So I did like that. He doesn't like the affairs that are going on. He really, it's, by the end of the story, his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom are really he's done with them, and he likes The Great Gatsby kind of the best, ends up kind of being his defender. If you don't know much about it, it's Roaring Twenties type American New York area, and there's East Egg and West Egg, which is basically, the geography of it is basically New York. And I think one of the things that it does most successfully is put you there. It helps you see the way the wealthy at that time, and maybe the wealthy in every age, kind of how they thought and how they lived and what they were about. And it was really them, really all about them and how they looked. And I think the reason that Fitzgerald has his main character end up liking Gatsby is because even though ultimately Gatsby is all about Gatsby, in the same way that, in some of the same ways that the other wealthy people are, he was a little more concerned about other people than Daisy and her husband. He wanted Daisy for himself because it was about him, and he was very egocentric in the same way and kind of had rejected his family and was making his own way, but he seemed to think about somebody besides himself sometimes. And for me, that was probably what was redeeming about Gatsby. And Daisy and Tom, they're just a wake of destruction, So the main character is not as wealthy as these other men. He's middle class, and he has gone to West Egg and rented a little house so that he could study and work. And Daisy is his cousin, and so there's a little bit of a relationship there, not much of one. And so he goes over, they invite him over, and he visits, and this relationship develops. And he happens to they live in East Egg, which is the fashionable side, and he lives in West Egg next to this huge mansion, which is Gatsby's mansion. And so over time, he hears Gatsby's parties, he wanders into the parties, he's eventually introduced to Gatsby. Gatsby finds out that he knows Daisy, so he develops a relationship so he can get to Daisy, which is the whole reason he's even there, and that he's become wealthy. And over time you find out that his wealth was not really legally gained. But it's all about impressing Daisy and getting Daisy back. So it's kind of interesting. But I think that more than the other characters, Gatsby has a little bit healthier boundaries. He's a little bit more caring, understanding, but he really is all caught up in himself too. The author tells in little snippets, ends up telling Gatsby's story. And Gatsby lies about where his money came from and who he is and what his background is, and eventually it comes out. And once Daisy sees clearly that his money is kind of ill-gotten and that he's not truly wealthy in the same way Tom is, she's like, she's just done. Because she's all about her. But the basic storyline is that Daisy comes from a wealthier family. She was the belle of everything. And she and Gatsby had been in love, but Gatsby was poor. He was in the military. And he was shipped off. Gatsby thought that she was going to wait for him. He distinguished himself in the military. He came back determined to earn money. But by the time he got back, she had married Tom. And Tom came along and swept her off her feet. So it's, you know, it's there. It's probably worth reading once. Kind of one of those, everybody reads it, so you should probably just be culturally aware. There's not anything in it that's, you know, inappropriate, except that, I mean, from the standpoint of, you know, like, having anybody do anything in the book, that doesn't get described. It's just that they're just careless, inconsiderate people. So Tom's having an affair, and he brings the main character along with him to meet his girl, and you know, and then she ends up being run over and all this kind of thing. And so it's probably worth reading once so you know what it's about. And it will probably give you a little bit of insight into, you know, turn of the century America, kind of what it was like, what people were doing. But you know, it's very amoral, immoral. They're just very, I mean, just very, very, very self-absorbed and unhappy. And that is one thing that I like, is that their lifestyle doesn't get them anything good. It doesn't make them happy. It doesn't help them be fulfilled. They're just a mess. And you can tell they're a mess. And having money and getting everything that they want doesn't make anything any better. In fact, it probably makes it worse. So I do kind of like that message that's going on in the book. As far as writing goes, it's very, very easy read. And sometimes it's a little slow. I think he's doing kind of a Hemingway type, you're going to know what's going on without me telling you kind of a thing, which I guess that's a good thing to develop and can be kind of cool from a literary standpoint. Sometimes it bugged me. Sometimes I would rather he just came out and said, here's what's going on. But, you know, that's just my personal taste. Not on my top 100, but it probably needs to be read so that you know what's in it. And it's worth discussing. There's still, you know, valuable things to discuss as far as wealth and selfishness and carelessness. They just can't, and from the standpoint of, you know, educated, went to Oxford, read the stuff, you know, they don't act educated. They don't act wise on any level. They just they're too lazy to think, I think, was really what interested me to watch, how they're just, you know, he kind of likes this girl that's Daisy's friend, and she just lies about stuff, and she just doesn't care about anybody. That's just kind of that careless, neglectful laziness, which is kind of interesting because Peck says that hate isn't the opposite of love, laziness is. And that really is exemplified in this book. Anyway, read it, discuss it. It's worth reading once. I don't know, maybe you'll fall in love with it, but I didn't. Anyway, see you next time.